You're listening to Served Up, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful conversations. I'm your host, Bridget Albert, also known as a Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with decades of experience. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry. Hey y'all, it's Bridget here. I had the honor of chatting with the one and only Ivan Saldaña. Ivan is a true visionary in the world of spirits. As a master distiller and chief innovation officer at Casa Lumbre, Ivan has been at the helm of some of the most exciting and innovative projects in our industry. With a deep respect for tradition and an eye on the future, his work is reshaping how we think about agave spirits and beyond. From crafting award-winning tequilas and mezcals to pushing boundaries with new techniques and flavors, Ivan's approach combines not only artistry, science, but also a relentless passion for quality. In this interview, we'll dive into his journey, his philosophy on innovation, and what's next for him. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Ivan, welcome to Served Up. I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Very happy to be here too.
Wonderful. Can you tell our listeners a bit about yourself? Where are you from? What was it like growing up? And what led you into the beverage industry?
So I'm Mexican. I am originally from Guadalajara, which is the second largest city. It's within the state of Jalisco, where a lot of our listeners will know tequila come from. So I grew up in the town for all my childhood until I was 18, 19 years old. And I was very passionate about nature since a very young age, which took me into a path to become a biologist. When I was 19, I went away to study. I studied a little bit in Mexico, but eventually I went to Chile, I went to Barbados, and I finished in Montreal at different stages, different years during my bachelor degree. I finished my bachelor degree in Montreal. And so at that point, I knew very clearly I was very driven by what nature can bring to us. During my teenage years as well, I was really strongly involved in conservation and organizations doing that, like spending my summers in conservation camps in the US, in Mexico, in Chile again. I was there during those times. So for me, nature and the mystery of it has always been something fascinating. At the end of my bachelor, I was more into plants. Plants seems boring because they look like they don't move. But in fact, the fact that they are stick to that square meter where they exist, they make them extremely complex inside. So their solutions come from the inside to the outside, and they have enormous variability in their metabolisms, in their biochemistry. So that inspired me to pursue a PhD in biology and biochemistry of plant in stress, basically plants that lives in the edge. And my model plant was the agave plant. So that is what starts to connect things to spirits. I never imagined myself distilling anything. I have to say that happened for different reasons and the serendipity of life, let's say. But I finished my PhD, and as I acquired a lot of knowledge of how agave plants perform, how their biology works, how their biochemistry happens, there was a big crisis at the time in the country with a lot of pests going on, a very big impact in the plantations of agaves, and companies were interested in hiring a person like me. So I ended up working for the industry, and eventually I learned to distill, and I fell in love with that. And I started to understand I could interpret everything I knew from the scientific background into smell and taste, that a lot of those molecules that plants produce in order to to face their destinies in the outside happens to bring us flavors and smell. And that is really the background and the perspective from where I've been developing my work through the multiple brands I had created.
Can we talk a little bit about those brands and your journey through the brands? What was one of the first brands that you started on, and, let's end up to where you are today.
So in my professional career, I have to mention an important step between what I'm doing right now, which is I'm a co-founder of Casa Lumbre together with Moises Guindy and Danish Neivais. They were already entrepreneurs. They created Milagro Tequila at some moment in their lives. And eventually we get to know each other and start things. But in between this PhD thing and this independent moment, let's say, where I am building a company and my own self-inspired brands, I had a very important phase, which was the time in the company. So Pernod Ricard is the company who hires me. And it's with them that I start to get the knowledge and the experience of distillation and spirits production. So I originally was hired to help them with agronomical issues, as I was able to assess and address and understand the raw material, the blue agave. But eventually, due to the things that happen in companies, I finished directing the R&D laboratory and creating things. So yes, there's a few brands. Altos, for example. Altos Tequila at the time was Ambition. By a French guy, Olivier Fage, who was the director of marketing in Pernod. And I had a great opportunity to work with Jesus Hernandez, who was a master distiller then, but I was the director of new product development. So a lot of the work there with bartenders like Dre Masso and other people, we created that concept. At the time, I was also in charge with a lot of different brands. Maybe I created line extensions, which I don't think are relevant, but I was making wine. I was producing liqueurs like Kahlua, for instance. We were doing brandy, great brandy. There are very relevant big brands in Mexico that, because we used to be, it's ending now, but for a lot of years, brandy was the number one spirit in our country, in Mexico. So I really had a wonderful opportunity, as I always like to say. It was like my second PhD because I spent around 5-6 years with Pernod, and I was able to acquire all these skills, all these understanding on the technologies and the techniques and the raw materials in a direct way. But with all honesty, my fascination and my desire to express the raw potential of Mexican raw materials and ingredients into spirit wasn't satisfied there. I mean, they are a very big company. They have a very specific agenda. They play with large brands, and I was not satisfied. And with a very nice agreement, we got divorced. Let's say I left Pernod, although now I have a great relationship too, because they are my partners in some brands. Strangely, a different relationship built up later on in life. But I left, and there is when Danny and Moy appears in my professional life, and we partner, and then we start to create things together. And our first brand was Montelobos Mezcal. It's a brand I love deeply, because the face we were in the company, we were 4 people. I mean, Danny, Moy, myself, and Betty, the assistant. We started like that. Danny and Moy were not anymore like actively participating in Milagro because there was a transaction. They sold it to William Grant & Sons. So it was a beautiful time of being a generalist to everything. I was the director of the company for some time, so I was looking at marketing, about what we really want to bring here. And the fascination of a region like Oaxaca and the opportunity of learning more deeply and partnering with master distillers that are locals into bringing a mezcal that has its unicities, their own characteristics from my inspiration, which was how I can capture the complexities the agave can bring and the mezcal production can bring in a balanced way. So that is one of the most educational, empowering, and more challenging projects I have ever made. And in a way, I think is probably the biggest in sense of of the foundational role it took into my life, into my personal development, Montelobos. And Ancho Reyes, for sure, which was a forgotten recipe, which we never really had in our hands, but we knew from the grandchild of someone who used to drink it that there was this spicy liqueur. And then my job was to try to bring them back, to discover the agriculture of it, because a lot of what I do is connecting the field with the transformation into a high quality product. And that thing is really what passionates me the most. As I understand very well the connection between the plant themselves as a plant biologist, but at the same time, I'm a producer, I understand how you can interconnect these two things in a great manner to really bring something beautiful.
You are incredibly fascinating, Ivan, truly. Not just because you're highly educated with a PhD, but I can see your passion just coming across the screen. And so with that said, can you talk to the culture of agriculture, the importance of the plants itself to the communities to which it's grown, you know, even before it's then produced into an incredible spirit that you're working on? Can you share some of that with our listeners?
Absolutely. I mean, Mexico is the house of one of the largest diversity in the world, as biology refers or speaks. But when you go to ingredients in the culinary world, it's immense. I mean, the UNESCO provided to Mexico the recognition as a patrimony of humanity, as an intangible patrimony of humanity a few years ago. And it's because 500 years ago, Mexico was the center of the world. The first largest globalization that existed was when Asia and Europe got connected. And well, it happens that Americas was in the middle. And Mexico was the center of it. You had the Spaniard empire connecting from China and the Philippines into Mexico. And from there, we were able to share things like chili, cacao, tomato, vanilla, and receive other things like sugarcane. The spices that were coming from Asia and were coming out of Mexico were immense. So we've been a very sunny place since a long time ago, and that allows agriculture to be very, very rich. And we are a country full of multiple cultures that still prevail, not as much as was 500 years ago, with their own breeds, with their own raw materials. Chilies, for instance. Chilies are a very restricted number of species, all of them on the genus Capsicum. But from the Capsicum annum, which is the base, you get everything you imagine. The Indians make food with those chilies. So let's talk chilies. Chilies is really a product that has been farmed in very different ways in different regions. We use for Ancho Reyes, we use an ancho chili, which is really poblano chili, a particular chili that grows in the center of Mexico after it's ripe and sun-dried in the vine. And in order to make an excellent product, our work was to go to the tiny town. So we went to San Rafael Tlanalapan, which is in Puebla, like 2 hours away from 1 hour away from Puebla City, and developed links. So this business we are in is in fact a very strongly agricultural product driven thing. Another example, of course, is the agave world. Casa Lumbre at this moment, we have created Montelobos, which is fully organic. I mean, it's one of the, if not the only brand in the market, and in that size in particular, who has maintained and stayed true to trying to make the most sustainable agriculture possible. But to achieve that, we had to start to make partnerships with farmers and develop our own agricultural company and strategy. So we partner with them with different schemes that are always looking for a fair win-win deal, growing from espadín to other species that many times, many brands are taken from the wild, something I consider an absolute sin. Like, for example, Tovala, Cupriata, we have a large program now. and all the time exploring. So that's another example. We work a lot in Oaxaca, in different regions, from the region of El Camarón to the border with Puebla, in different regions, and also in Puebla itself, in the Mije region in Puebla. So there is a lot of things going on. Today, Ojo de Tigre is benefiting from that project. But there's also other companies who are looking for us to help them to become more sustainable and to have a better relationship with the communities that generates those raw materials for their products.
I want to go back to something that you just said. And you said some of the wild grown, like the tobala, harvesting that in your eyes is a sin. Why?
Because of the context. The south of Mexico, particularly Oaxaca and Puebla, is a place where private property doesn't exist. So this is communal land. And the thing with communal land is that it's very, very hard to follow rules and establish and to warranty that the quotes on the extractions of any raw materials that exist in nature are actually well managed. As there's no one owning it, there's also no one to be accountable. So in the old times, when mezcal was a traditional drink in the towns and cities, and for the celebrations of the locals in their traditions, there was not a big issue. I mean, the local will go to the hills that was a couple of kilometers away of the village and found some tobala and will harvest it within a wooden area of oaks, which is where typically tobala grows. And they will bring and make their mezcal for the 15 years old child, right? Because we are very big in this celebration, 15 years old daughters. And that was okay. But when the branch comes and starts to make deals and promote this mezcal and keep buying from small producers that has to harvest from them, then it's an issue. In fact, the agricultural establishment of plantation of these species didn't exist because they go from tiny little seeds. I'm not going to get very technical, but we had to got into learning that and establish plantations through research and development because if not, we're going to have tobala. In the last 5-6 years, where brands are facing difficulties to access to those raw materials because they are basically extinct in multiple regions in Oaxaca, things have been changing because the larger companies, they want plantations of these rarest agaves in order to produce. But historically wasn't the case, and that affected dramatically. The other thing, for example, is wood. Agave requires lots of wood because of the process. We cook them. And still today, Oaxaca has the second largest, biggest problem of deforestation in the country. And most of the wood utilized in the production of many mezcal comes from the open market. Whatever you can find, because there's a man that comes in a truck and offers you wood. And we, at least in the brands I'm making, we are trying to make an impact and provide a way in which instead of that, we go, that's not certified wood. That can come from everywhere. We need to go to certified wood sources. If not, we're going to have an impact. So just to give you an example, making spirits from Mexico to the world requires brands to become responsible and create fair links with communities and with nature to be sustainable. And at least in our side, and from my background and my passion to nature, I've been doing everything I can to do that. That in the case of mezcal, that in the case of corn, we can talk later, that in the case of sotol, which is a more mysterious, not so well planted in the north of Mexico.
And, it makes perfect sense, right? We want to take care of nature because if we don't, nature is not going to take care of us.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day. And, for the listeners that maybe aren't so hip to even what mezcal and tequila are, would you break it down for them?
So mezcal and tequila are agave spirits. In fact, there used to be only one category for centuries and was mezcal. Mezcal means a distillate made from agave. But tequila became a very famous mezcal. So at some point decided not to mention the mezcal and only talk the tequila. In every label, it used to say mezcal de tequila, just like cognac. If you think in cognac, you maybe think it's a very different product, but it's just a brandy from cognac. Now everybody forgot it's a brandy, but it's still a brandy. Well, tequila is a mezcal for a very specific place made with a very specific plant. And they decided to call themselves differently, both legally and in the common use of words between the people. And mezcal used to stay as the generalistic name for any agave distillates. But a few years ago, a couple of decades ago, some people organized in Oaxaca, which they have the biggest tradition around it, decided they want to restrict the name to be used only in certain areas. So today, the word mezcal only represents those agave spirits that are coming from particular states in Mexico, around 12, if I'm not wrong right now, because they've been allowing other new ones to enter. There was 9, now it's 12. But the true, honest meaning of mezcal is any purely made 100% agave spirit. Today, with legal definitions, some may be called like that. Others will have to call themselves agave distillates because they will not accomplish the legal framework that allowed the use of that name that was taken for those that were clever and I would say politically savvy to keep that name for themselves. But then that's how things are and things change their meaning. But the difference in practicality for a consumer or a bartender is that mezcal tend to keep the traditional methods of production that existed in the rural areas, where no steam or hacienda economy existed. I mean, if you look at Jalisco, the northern Mexico, Guanajuato, where you can also find mezcal, when the Spaniards arrived, they came with their own pre-capitalist industrialization, which was you organize people around a central big house in the middle of a land, and you will make them produce things, either agricultural goods or leather because they have cows, but you make them productive through organizing the work. So tequila is that example. You have a guy who cut the agave, then others experts in cooking them and fermenting them, and then you have a guy who distills. A team of people producing in large amounts products that are going to sell in the city. In Oaxaca and in Michoacan and in other mezcal places, you don't have that. You have a family that eats from the food they actually grow, and they go to the local village distillery, which is just a hall with two containers to ferment, and they make a batch of mezcal for their 15 years old girl party because they want to introduce it to. So the same guy will plant the agave, will cut the agave, will mash the agave, will ferment the agave, will distill the agave, or maybe the family, a team of 4. So it's a total different thing as well on its history. But in flavor, one is typically cooked underground in a very rustic way, basically using bonfires. This wood I was talking before that is becoming scarce due to the overexploitation of it. But you make a bonfire, you put rocks, and that is going to cook the agave, will make it smoky, and that's what you will learn. Oh, tequila is no smoky, agave is smoky. There's more differences, but I would say that's the most relevant two difference between these two.
So, what you're saying is that tequila evolved from mezcal in the production of using steam versus smoke.
Yes, although when the Spaniards arrived, they already had a lot of technologies available. So they evolved, but let's say mezcal has always been made through technologies like the tequila one and other more rudimentaries. Like, let's say, in a way, they are contemporaries. Of course, the mezcal ones existed for thousands of years. The cooking pot for agave, the first evidence is actually not in Mexico. It's in New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. So when the first nomads, they crossed the Bering Strait 10,000 years ago, were moving, they discovered that if they burn agaves, they were able to get a sweet sap and they would get nourished with it. So in the deserts of North America, the first agaves starts to appear. And there is where the dimension, the structure, and the way of work of the cooking ovens of mezcal originated 10,000 years ago. Those same technologies is the ones you will see in the mezcal world today for these small batch, tiny produce, family-owned distilleries, which we call palenques. Is an inheritance. And they just brought it to crossing the country and spreading it around the culture. But Mexico didn't distill. Mexico learned to distill when the Spaniards arrived. Although there's a debate there, I'm not going to get there. I am absolutely convinced, and science gives most of the evidence to that.
That is really interesting. And I have to say, in all of my years studying, tequila and mezcal, you really paint the picture in such an easier way to digest. So thank you, because I feel like both topics can be very complicated when you do a deep dive and you study these categories. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Can you talk to not only the difference in production, but can we talk about the difference in taste of mezcal and tequila?
Yeah, of course. So agaves has a particular nature in their biology, and that's why they make the most complex spirits coming out of a still from a single ingredient. I mean, if you're thinking whiskey, that's flavored alcohol. You typically make alcohol out of a grain, which can provide certain flavor, but from everything possible, grains are the poorest flavor-wise spirits you can actually make, white spirits coming off a still. And that's because their chemical complexity is mostly starch and a little bit of fat, right? And when you look at fruit, that gets a little bit more complex. If you're thinking apples or you're thinking grapes, then things gets better. You have organic acids, you have terpenes, you have things that are flavored. When you think about agave, it's a different world, because this plant that evolved for 12 million years in the middle of the most complex and difficult environment in the desert, having to live a very long life, having to accumulate lots of resources but nobody has them, has to fight against their attackers. So agaves, rich in sugar, rich in water, are successful survivors in the middle of the desert where everybody's thirsty and everybody's hungry. So in order to do that, the plant developed a lot of molecules that happen to taste this green dimension, right? Grass, sometimes citrus like a mandarin or orange or things like that. Well, all of that is coming from the green agave. And those green elements, you will not find it easily in other things, and there are many. Then the agave has another peculiarity. Their sugars has to be cooked in order to be fermented. One of the adaptations agave has to have was to hide in the open large amount of sugars. So what they did was to take the fructose molecule, very abundant in nature, a lot of fruit has it, and make chains. But what they build in between is a link that is undigestible for most creatures in the world, including bacteria, including many things. That link is like all bran. You know what all bran is? Cellulose. Cellulose is basically glucose, but you don't digest it. It just comes through your digestion system. Well, the raw sugars of agave are exactly the same. In fact, they can be even dangerous because very few bacteria can use them and they produce a lot of gas. So if we start and eat a kilo of raw agave sugar, maybe we explode later on and we can even die. So it will not nourish you. So in order to use it, we have to break it. And in order to break it, we have to cook it because heat breaks down those molecules. So agave is one of those very few raw materials, if not the only, that has to be cooked in order to be transformed into a sweet sap. And cooking sugar creates a very beautiful reaction called Maillard reaction. Most chefs know it very, very well, because that reaction generates an enormous, still today infinite number of sensorial component of flavors and smells by the reaction that the carbon, the nitrogen, the oxygen present in the sugar and in the proteins of the plants generate. Think, for example, in caramel or in dulce de leche in Spanish. So that reaction creates flavors like dry fruits, like roasting notes, meaty notes sometimes. So it creates a very delicious, sweet, caramellic kind of dimension. That's the second dimension. Those two exist in tequila and exist in mezcal. And the reason tequila is so selected now, so recognized now, is because being a white spirit have on one side this happy, fresh side, but also this deep, complex sweetness. But mezcal has additional elements that make it very exciting. First, it has been maintained as a wild fermented spirit. While most tequilas, they like to use their yeast, they have been looking for a lot of efficiency. which when you use in a very controlled environment a selected yeast, the chemical complexity in that fermentation is not very large. You produce some alcohols and some elements. But in the mezcal world, you will have not really a yeast. You will have a group of different organisms working on this raw material, creating multiple different complex notes. For example, in mezcal, you sometimes find notes like nail polish or white gas. Is a dimension in the let's say more solvent-like notes, I would call it. Those are typically made by acetic bacteria. But then you also have things that are very fruity, sometimes banana and mango, and that's very difficult to understand because that's not related with the chemicals you will find in agave. But that's because you have lactic and malolactic bacteria. You know, in French wines, they put it in barrels and they add these bacteria to finish and make more complex things. Well, we have that simultaneously. We generate the alcohol, we transform the sugars into agave, into extremely complex, flavorful substances. Then the job of the master distiller is how he's going to work with it, with the acidity of it, with the intensity, because alcohol proofs are also very variable in the world of mezcal, and with all that richness to encapsulate, to compound something that is really delicious. And that is, depending on the perspective, could be done in multiple ways. In the tequila world, they are very traditional, but tequilas tend to taste relatively close one with each other. I mean, I'm not saying they're identical, but in mezcal, that is incredibly ample. And this is because also you have an element called historic taste. I mean, that's known, for example, by the Eskimos that walk around in a white hill. They can see 14 different white colors when we can probably only see one. Well, when you taste mezcal for so long, or you come from a community, just like an Eskimo community, that happens as well. So you have like traditional mezcals that has been produced by locals. So let's say, traditional mezcal from local families, which some of the brands that are being successful now in the US come from there. You can have more author-like mezcal, like the ones I do with Montelobos or Ojo de Tigre, which from my own perspective, look, I'm from Guadalajara, a privileged Mexican with opportunity to access to university that had tasted other things. So mezcal allows as well an enormous artistic space for people like me who are passionate about it to bring our own opportunity to take that richness and paint a bottle with our own desires to express, right? And that is something which makes mezcal different. That's why I would say it's been a product I have liked and I'm very fascinated. But I have also to say that being from Jalisco, and still never made a tequila brand from my own, really, like from my inspiration, and one day I'm going to make a tequila, and probably will be soon, that will truly express the higher potential from my biologic perspective I will be able to bring. But for the moment, let's keep talking about the brands that are out there and that are coming from this. So mezcal and tequila are different. What is in mezcal? So that funkiness. And finally, the smoke. If you cook using wood, you will create combustion, and that will create molecules that will get embedded in the raw material, and that will be trapped later on. So while tequila has the green, fresh, and caramelic side, the mezcal has that, plus the funkiness and complexities of wild fermentation and the smoky, woody elements that the peat roasting provides. I hope I have answered your question.
Oh, you sure did. I think you nailed it, Ivan. I love having you on as a guest. This is great. Can you talk about what you're working on currently? You know, let's dive into all the great things that you're doing.
So some of the recent brands is an inspiration, and we generally, for us, every brand is a new project in terms of a space for creativity and for expressing something. When we develop Abasolo, which is a ancestral corn whiskey, which this ancestral corn whiskey use a particular variety called Cacavaciti. It doesn't matter. We build a distillery, but then the question is, what are we going to do with the world of corn? And eventually Nixa came to life too. So that's the way my way of thinking, and my team, because I don't work alone. I have a very group of talented people, both in the lab and in the distilleries, exploring and creating together with me. and in the farm, because that's also something that matters. How are we going to farm and sustain that? So those things are within my responsibility in the company. And both are always thinking, how are we going to penetrate the world of a raw material from the agricultural, but in bringing more. So recently I launched a brand called Alma Finca that you probably know is from Yucatan. Yucatan has the largest diversity of citrus in the world. Citrus is not Mexican. Citrus came from, the sweet orange, the Persian lime, incredibly relevant ingredient in Mexico is not Mexican. Our base of acidity is lime. In other places, they have, soy sauce. They have vinegar in Europe, but in Mexico, we adopted that. Well, that came from the Sevillan big houses that used to decorate their houses, and the Spaniard brought it and found a great place in Mexico. And we made it an ingredient for eating. But the Chinese, through the Spaniards who used to make commerce and bring in a lot of that, brought us oranges and brought us grapefruits and brought us many things. And once they arrive into the peninsula, they go crossbreeding. So I'm exploring a lot the potential of different ingredients, or let's say varieties of citrus that exist in the Yucatan Peninsula. I use many of them in Alma Finca already, which is orange liqueur, bitter orange liqueur with other things. But the beauty of that one is I use the flowers and the fresh leaves. So it's not the traditional control. This is a more elevated, more intense experience that is greener, is closer to the earth, more mineral, whatever. But there is a space of exploration that is enormous. One of the beautiful things of the Yucatan is honey, for example. So right now I'm trying to look at honey that is local from particular type of Melipona bees. I don't know if you know what they are, but different species. We could make a concoction of that. Also, if we could utilize the freshness to create maybe lower proof expressions of citrus, which is a subject I would love to keep talking to you, which is for me a very relevant subject in these days. Low alcohol content and non-alcohol content as well. And I believe that there's a lot of potential there. And then, of course, from the agave side, we launched 2 years ago a brand with Lewis Hamilton, the Formula One driver, called Agave. Is one of the biggest gifts I have received from the outside in terms of inspiration, to suddenly receive a phone call. Well, I didn't receive it, was actually Moy, about someone who really wanted to make a non-alc with agave. At the first, he's like, what? Why? What are you talking about? And he's, no, man, this guy is Lewis Hamilton. And he's very serious about it. And he has a tremendous desire because respects agave and has a connection with it. But alcohol is an issue for him. Can we listen what he wants and figure out if there's something there? And after meeting this guy and understanding the perspective of things, I got just fascinated. And in that sense, it's been a wonderful experience to try to put everything I know and everything my team knows, because there's others incredible contributors, into trying to bring to the world an agave distillate that contains no alcohol, but still captures the essence of flavors of the blue agave. And in that quest, well, Almavi is out there already. We have a Blanco. We have one what we call Amber, which is trying to mimic a Reposado. It's not really aged in a barrel because water in a barrel will not extract anything, but it has wood extractions we do with high pressure and temperature to provide a mouthfeel that will bring a little bit of this. Listen, it tastes a lot with the complexities of agave, but it's not tequila. It doesn't taste identical to it. It's an adult, complex, delicious drink that can make you wonderful margaritas and other cocktails that you can sip to, but it's not tequila. It's an agave distilled non-alcoholic drink. And I think it's fine. I think in that sense, I'm a liberal. I'm just saying this because sometimes when we love categories, we became puristic. We start to create barriers and say, no, you are not allowed to do it. If you are not the son of someone from that coming from the industry, or if you want to do something without alcohol, they immediately will judge you in a negative way. And in that sense, all my life I've been very, let's say, apologetic of what I do. And I think in the trade, In the trade, my name is many times called with a lot of excitement, and sometimes it's called with doubt, because I have done very strange projects from Nixta or Abasolo, but I also, I also jump from one category to another, which is not the typical thing. Most of us, a master distiller, were grown, let's say, imagine someone in Scotland, your grandfather worked in a distillery and you ended up there. So you are typically geographically connected or focused in one category, and it's not my case. So we are exploring a lot the non-alc world, because I strongly believe that my goal in my love with our plants is not only to provide those experiences that can be made by distilling them, transforming them in alcohol, but it's also my desire, but let's say, my call in life, to look at them in different perspectives and see how I can bring that in a healthy, delicious, complex way to the world. And I think Casa Lumbre, we are Casa Lumbre Spirits, is rethinking a little bit the extent of their purpose. We knew since the early times our goal was to bring the sensorial, cultural, and biological patrimony of Mexico into spirits. So that is kind of the platform. But after Almave, although our goal is exactly the same in terms of bringing the patrimony of Mexico in all these different dimensions, we just have to acknowledge and recognize that is not only through the presence of alcohol in what we do. That is time to turn around, look at Mexico has, and offer things that are maybe low alc in many ways, because many things are subjective to that. And also its entire dimension for making complex, delicious drinks that are more healthy. Because it's not only the alcohol, a health problem for the world. It's sugar, for instance. Is the ingredients you use to preserve food, which now there's new technologies that you can do it in a much more healthy way. And I don't know, at least for me, I'm still early in this business. It's just a new mindset that is more ample. So for me, Almave has been an opportunity to expand the self-definition of who I am professionally. So I'm not just a master distiller. I'm someone who can capture things in favor of other kind of products. A guy who knows agave very well and wants to keep developing things, but also that want to expand from the delicious opportunity of a spirit to bring all that legacy and tradition that Mexico has in the alcohol world, yes, but why not doing other things too? So the non-alc, particularly Almave, will bring new things next year, which I'm not going to talk here, but I hope people will be excited for what's coming. And yes, I mean, those two of the things I'm doing right now, plus others. And it's not only me now. One of the things is happening in Casa Lumbre is, while many years I was really leading the ideation and the identification of those opportunities, I have built such a tremendous team, really, that now they are the ones getting their own inspiration and bringing ideas into the table. So instead of being the master distiller now, I feel more like leading a group of extraordinary people who is capable of presenting their passion into products. So Casa Lumbre will continue surprising the world, I hope, with wonderful propositions.
Oh, I love all the great work that you and your team are doing, and especially around the low and no category. It is a category, like you said, I mean, it's absolutely growing. There is so much to discover. And what it does is, within this category, it just opens up a space for everyone to enjoy something, whether you're at a party, you're at a restaurant, you're at a bar. You don't have to feel a little bit less than, because maybe at that moment you don't want something that's, high proof. You don't feel like having that glass of wine or a beer, whatever it might be. And to have that alternative and still have it to be delicious with a lot of integrity is important. It makes beverage more inclusive.
Look, it's a new request that will be for sure a cultural change. I mean, I speak with bartenders, and of course, we get so good in what we know to do. And when you know to mix spirits that has alcohol, and then they ask you, well, we have to have two other drinks in the menu that has no alcohol, for many bartenders still today is not exciting. And that mindset has to change. Or they call it in the wrong way, like mocktails, like if you were mocking someone, like trying to cheat somebody. And that is wrong. We are not cheating anybody. If you are a passionate bartender, little by little, you have to understand that the same craft and same passion you put for that drink that is blending to alcohol products with whatever ingredients you choose, you have to be creating an experience that is equally extraordinary for the other one. It's a duty of what we do, right? I mean, we are flavor professionals. We create experiences with meaning, and we create experiences that can connect nature, culture, and that doesn't have to be only to alcohol. So I think, and I want to be part of that culture change, although, of course, I will also continue to be part of the alcohol world too, because I also think these two things doesn't have to be divorced at all by any chance. I believe alcohol in a good consumption. I mean, imagine when you get a glass of ice cream, this ultra refined sugar will create an impact on you. And you have to be aware of it. But that doesn't mean let's ban all the ice cream, because it can create and can produce cancer and can produce many things. We have to be conscious of what the ice cream can actually do. But why don't we enjoy an ice cream every now and then, and we do it in the right way? So I think there's no need of choosing a side. It's a thing of consciousness and the ability to integrate diversity in the mind. By the way, a concept that lately on in politics and the energy of people is being lost. People want to like choosing religion. Yeah, people is divided. People is not understanding diversity. People is not understanding that it doesn't have to be, I mean, that is more, let's say, incongruent to understand a world that is fixed and square and inflexible, because that's not the reality, than to understand that you have to be fluid. But people is like craving these big truths which cannot be like that, because truth is not like that. And in exchange, they are getting in a place of lack of authenticity. And we have to do things from that place. Authenticity is the only thing that can make a project to flower, to grow.
You know what? Those are some words of wisdom that I think we should put on a T-shirt and sell that. It's like such a great quote.
Let's sell non-alc, low alcs, and alcs.
You know, authenticity is everything, you know, from the product down to a person. If you are not authentic in everything that you do, you'll burn out. You'll not last. You're not creating something that's generational or that really has any legs to stand on itself. It's just a flash in the pan.
And listen, there's also companies, people, realities that in order to change them, instead of ban it, instead of rejecting them, instead of judging them, you have to get in contact with them to change it. I'm going to tell you an example. Sotol. So Sotol is in the north. Sotol is mostly private property and it has enormous amount of kilometer squares of wilderness. And in that desertic wilderness grows a plant called Sotol. Dasylirion is a genus. And you can produce a spirit called Sotol. And traditionally, for many, many years, centuries, the locals has made a spirit called, with the same name, Sotol. We, a group of people fascinated with it, decided to jump into creating a brand. The brand we have created is Noche Luna. But the problem is, just like Oaxaca, I explained you that, to be clear, every single, or let's say, not every single, but most of everything you will see in the mezcal world will come from a wild agave. And that is a problem. In Sotol is similar. It has the same problem, but for the benefit of Sotol, they have enormous amount of areas with very little population and a very small volume is still made. So environmentally speaking, still today, the small Sotol producers from little towns hasn't created an impact. But imagine, comes Casa Lumbre creating a brand that is big. Well, if we don't do things right, we will impact that environment. So since day one, we started to establish plantation of a plant that was never domesticated. And during the years until we get this plant grown, we are following all the environmental rules and everything. And yes, we are doing a spirit that comes from wild plants. That became sometimes judged in a bad way for us because there was this idea that, oh, the big companies came, my partner is Pernod Ricard, and they will not do the right thing. But it's on the opposite. If we want to create a market and a space for those small producers, we have to go and touch that reality and change it. And the way to do it is, of course, keep in an absolute careful manner the extraction of those raw materials in the most accountable way for us, the big ones. And then we have to teach the small ones, which so far they are extracting the raw material with no, let's say, accomplishing the rules that are established for extraction because they are too complex for the very, very little producers, and start to try to change that. Ricardo Pico, who is my partner, he's from Chihuahua. He's strongly motivated and involved in that with the Consejo Regulador del Sotol. So in other words, most companies, large companies, they try to run away from the challenges that implies complex realities. They will never do a Sotol until things are already existing, right? They either because of business, you don't want to innovate creating a category that doesn't exist because who's going to buy it, or because of the social unknowns, or because of the legal frameworks, or because of the environmental elements. We in Casa Lumbre, we are entrepreneurs. That's what we do. We try to go there with our biggest heart and with the best intentions to try to align, organize, and put together the ingredients to generate wellness for everybody. And that's the case, for example, in Chihuahua with Noche Luna. Pernod Ricard actually partnered with us, which was a great thing. You start to see companies that are in the stock market, which has really strong objectives in subjects like the ones I was calling about, trusting our ability to make a difference and to bet for the construction of a new category. So, of course, I have to mention Lenny Kravitz, who, after being offered to make champagne or vodka or tequila, he was not interested, but he got fascinated from this obscure, mysterious, delicious, and unknown category called Sotol. So, I don't know. I think we've been extremely fortunate through our company lives to being able to find such great partners in developing these things.
Absolutely wonderful. And with that, can you tell our listeners where they can keep up with the latest projects that you're working on? Where can they find news?
I love the questions. We've been doing
Casa Lumbre.
Yeah, Casa Lumbre. We've been doing a lot of soul searching, I don't know, but talking within the team, and we see how little time I and the team is spending in sharing all of this. And I thank you for opening this space, because I'm really wanting to go, and not because to share what necessarily Casa Lumbre is doing, but to send a spark, to excite, to invite others to reflect in relevant subjects, both for the spirits industry, for the bartender industry, that how we can and how all of us has to become involved and aware and conscious of all these trends that are happening. And for the moment, there's not much. I mean, it's a webpage, casalumbre.com. So I welcome you. Is a Instagram accounts of the brands I'm producing that I can make a name, but it's Montelobos, Ancho Reyes, Ojo de Tigre, Nixta, Abasolo, Contraluz, Alma Finca, and of course Almave. Sorry, sometimes there are many. I hope I haven't forgot any other. Lost Irish, which is a partnership with a super nice guy, clever Irish guy, which is a whiskey that's not from Mexico, but we are partners too. But those are the main ones. And that's the way they're going to learn about. The Instagram of Casa Lumbre, which we are in the process of really reshaping how we communicate with the world. But I hope in the following 3 months, we will be more better communicators of what's going on, and sharing more about what's going on in the fields in terms of the experiments we are doing, like growing agave with papaya trees or with or with lime trees and sharing more of the lab. What are these strange, weird products we are creating that maybe will never be marketed because there's not a market for them, but we are doing very fun and cool things that we want to share to the world so people understand where Casa Lumbre stands in this business. And maybe some of our brand becomes big. We still are in the small to medium-sized brand, and most of them tiny. I mean, I'm talking about brands that maybe are not selling more than 2,000, 3,900 cases worldwide. But that's what we do. We bring children to the world. We try to be good parents, and eventually we allow the brands to have their own life, to go to other places, to create partnerships with other companies. Right now, we are partners with Pernod Ricard, for instance, or with Campari. And I think is a good sign that, I mean, sometimes in this politicized world, they think that large companies are evil and terrible. But honestly, these companies have one of the best standards in the world in terms of how they treat their employees. So I feel I'm the small one who are getting into that place too, the high standard, which is what I expect and desire for anything Casa Lumbre does every time we do something.
Well, I want to congratulate you and your team on all the great work that you're doing. And I would love to invite you back to be a recurring guest here on Served Up, and just to hear more about, what's going on in your world, how things are progressing. If you'd be open to that, we would love to have you back as our guest. And with
100%, we can talk general things, specific things. And if you let me in advance, which is the kind of subject you would like to cover, one of the things I believe is when you are listening a podcast is the responsibility of those speaking, not only to entertain, but to bring information that will enrich and expand the understanding of things to others. So this space is not only wonderful because people will probably learn a little bit more about my brands and maybe someone goes and buy a bottle, but what fulfills me the most is the opportunity to enrich the souls and the life of others with information they probably don't know. I'm an educator in my core. I mean, I spend so much time in academics, and I used to be a teacher, that every time an opportunity like this open, my heart is happy. So please invite me again.
I would love that. And, with that, on behalf of Served Up, I just want to wish you some great health and a lot of peace. Ivan, thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thank you. Really.
Cheers to you. Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of our future Served Up episodes. Cheers.